Hello, welcome back to Story Time with Eric Zimmer. Where we last left off, we were in the inventing room where Mr. Wonka was just showing everybody a piece of chewing gum which he called his latest and greatest invention. And it seems like Violet Beauregard has taken some real interest in it. You shall find out what happens in the next 4 chapters. You ready? Alright, let's begin. Chapter 21. Goodbye, Violet. This gum, Mr. Wonka went on, is my latest and greatest invention, and most fascinating invention. It's a chewing gum meal. It's that tiny little strip of gum lying there is a whole 3-course dinner all by itself. What sort of nonsense is this? Said one of the fathers. My dear sir, cried Mr. Wonka, when I start selling this gum in the shops, it will change everything. It will be at the end of all kitchens and all cooking. There will be no more marketing to do, no more buying of meat and groceries. There will be no knives and forks at mealtimes, no plates, no washing up, no garbage, no mess. Imagine that. Just a little strip of Wonka's magic chewing gum, and that's all you'll ever need at breakfast, lunch, and supper. This piece of gum I have just made happens to be tomato soup, roast beef, and blueberry pie. But you can have almost anything you want. What do you mean it's tomato soup, roast beef, and blueberry pie? Said Violet Beauregard. If you were to start chewing it, said Mr. Wonka, then that is exactly what you would get on the menu. It's absolutely amazing. You can actually feel the food going down your throat and into your tummy. And you can taste it perfectly. And it fills you up. It satisfies you. It's terrific. It's utterly impossible, said Veruca Salt. Just so long as it's gum, shouted Violet Beauregard. Just so long as it's a piece of gum and I can chew it, then that's for me. And quickly she took out her own world record piece of chewing gum out of her mouth and stuck it behind her left ear. Come on, Mr. Wonka, she said. Hand over this magic gum of yours and we'll see if the thing works. Now, Violet, said Mrs. Beauregard, her mother. Don't let's do anything silly, Violet. I want the gums, Violet said obstinately. What's so silly? I would rather you didn't take it, Mr. Wonka told her gently. You see, I haven't got it quite right yet. There are still 1 or 2 things. Oh, to heck with that, said Violet. And suddenly, before Mr. Wonka could stop her, she shot out a fat hand and grabbed the stick of gum out of the little drawer and popped it into her mouth. At once, her well-trained jaws started chewing away on it like a pair of tongs. Don't, said Mr. Wonka. Fabulous, shouted Violet. It's tomato soup. It's hot and creamy and delicious. I can feel it running down my throat. Stop, said Mr. Wonka. The gum isn't ready yet. It's not right. Of course it's right, said Violet. It's working beautifully. Oh my, what lovely soup this is. Spit it out, said Mr. Wonka. It's changing, shouted Violet, chewing and grinning both at the same time. Second course is coming out. It's roast beef. It's tender and juicy. Oh boy, what a flavor. The baked potato is marvelous, too. It's got crispy skin and it's all filled with butter inside. How interesting, Violet, said Mrs. Beauregard. You are a clever girl. Well, I beg to differ. Keep chewing, kiddo, said Mr. Beauregard. Keep chewing, keep right on chewing, baby. This is a great day for the Beauregards. Our little girl is the first person in the world to have a chewing gum meal. You're gonna regret this. Everybody was watching Violet Beauregard as she stood there chewing this extraordinary gum. Little Charlie Bucket was staring at her absolutely spellbound, watching her huge rubbery lips as they pressed and unpressed with the chewing, and Grandpa Joe stood beside him, gaping at the girl. Mr. Wonka was wringing his hands and saying, No, it isn't ready for eating, it isn't right, you mustn't do it. Blueberry pie and cream, shouted Vi. Here it comes. It's perfect, it's beautiful, it's exactly as though I'm swallowing it. It's as though I'm chewing and swallowing great big spoonfuls of the most marvelous blueberry pie in the world. Good heavens, girl, shrieked Mrs. Beauregard suddenly, staring at Violet. What's happening to your nose? Oh, be quiet, Mother, and let me finish, said Violet. It's turning blue, screamed Mrs. Beauregard. Your nose is turning as blue as a blueberry. Your mother is right, shouted Mrs. Beauregard. Your whole nose has gone purple. What do you mean, said Violet, still chewing away. Your cheeks, screamed Mrs. Beauregard. They're turning blue as well. So is your chin. Your whole face is turning blue. Spit that gum out at once, ordered Mr. Beauregard. Told you they regret it. Mercy, save us, yelled Mrs. Beauregard. The girl is going blue and purple all over. Even her hair is changing color. Violet, you're turning violet, Violet! What is happening to you? I told you I hadn't got it quite right, sighed Mr. Wonka, shaking his head sadly. I'll say you haven't, cried Mrs. Beauregard. Just look at the girl now. Everybody was staring at Violet, and what a terrible, peculiar sight she was. Her face and hands and legs and neck, in fact the skin all over her body as well as her great big mop of curly hair, had turned a brilliant purplish blue, the color of blueberry juice. It always goes wrong when we come to the dessert, sighed Mr. Wonka. It's the blueberry pie that does it. But I'll get it right one day. You'll wait and see. Violet, screamed Mrs. Beauregard, you're swelling up. I feel sick, Violet said. You're swelling up, screamed Mrs. Beauregard again. I feel most peculiar, gasped Violet. I'm not surprised, said Mr. Beauregard. Good heavens, girl, screeched Mrs. Beauregard. You're blowing up like a balloon. Like a blueberry, said Mr. Wonka. Call a doctor, shouted Mr. Beauregard. Prick her with a pin, said one of the fathers. Save her, cried Mrs. Beauregard, wringing her hands. But there was no saving her now. Her body was swelling up and changing shape at such a rate that within a minute it had turned into nothing less than an enormous round blue ball. A gigantic blueberry, in fact, and all that remained of Violet Beauregard herself was a tiny pair of legs and a tiny pair of arms sticking out the great round fruit, and a little head on top. It always happens like that, sighed Mr. Wonka. I've tried it 20 times in the testing room on 20 Oompa Loompas, and every one of them finished up as a blueberry. It's most annoying. I can't understand it. But I don't want a blueberry for a daughter, yelled Mrs. Beauregard. Put her back to what she was this instant. Mr. Wonka clicked his fingers, and 10 Oompa Loompas appeared immediately at his sight. Roll Mrs. Beauregard into the boat, he said to them, and take her along to the juicing room at once. The juicing room? Cried Mrs. Beauregard. What are they going to do to her there? Squeeze her, said Mr. Wonka. We got to squeeze the juice out of her immediately. After that, we'll just have to see how she comes out. But don't worry, my dear Mrs. Beauregard. We'll get her repaired if it's the last thing we do. I am sorry about it all. I really am. Already, the 10 Oompa Loompas were rolling the enormous blueberry across the floor of the inventing room towards the door that led to the chocolate river where the boat was waiting. Mr. and Mrs. Beauregard hurried after him. The rest of the party, including Little Bucket and Grandpa Joe, stood absolutely still and watched them go. Listen, whispered Charlie. Listen, Grandpa. The Oompa Loompas in the boat outside are starting to sing. The voices, 100 of them singing together, came loud and clear into the room. I'm seriously not good at singing. Plus these songs are too long, so please forgive me. I'm just going to skip them. They're sung a lot better in the movie, mind you. Anyways. Chapter 22. Along the Corridor. Well, 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 sighed Mr. Wonka. 2 naughty, nasty little children gone. 3 good, sweet little children left. I think we'd better get out of this room quickly before we lose anyone else. But Mr. Wonka, said Charlie anxiously, will Violet Beauregard ever be all right again, or will she always be a blueberry? They'll dejuice her in no time flat, declared Mr. Wonka. They'll roll her into the dejuicing machine and she'll come out just as thin as a whistle. But will she still be blue all over? Asked Charlie. She'll be purple, cried Mr. Wonka. A fine rich purple from head to toe. But there you are. That's what comes from chewing disgusting gum all day long. If you think gum is so disgusting, said Mike TV, then why do you make it in your factory? I do wish you wouldn't mumble, said Mr. Wonka. I can't hear a word you're saying. Come on, off we go. Hurry up, follow me. We're going into the corridors again. And so saying, Mr. Wonka scuttled across to the far end of the inventing room and went out through a small secret door hidden behind a lot of pipes and stove. The 3 remaining children, Veruca Salt, Mike TV, and Charlie Bucket, together with the 5 remaining grown-ups, followed after him. Charlie Buckets, they were now back in one of those long pink corridors with many other pink corridors leading out of it. Mr. Wonka was rushing along in front, turning left and right and left, and Grandpa Joe was saying, "Keep good out of my hand, Charlie. It would be terrible to get lost in here." Mr. Wonka was saying, "No time for any more messing about. We'll never get anywhere at the rate we've been going." And on he rushed, down the endless pink corridor with his black top hat perched on the top of his head and his plum-colored velvet coattails flying out behind him like a flag in the wind. They passed another door, and another, and another. There were doors every 20 paces or so along the corridor now, and they all had something written on them, and strange clanking noises were coming from behind several of them, and delicious smells came wafting through the keyholes. And sometimes little jets of colored steam shot out from the cracks underneath. Grandpa Joe and Charlie were half running and half walking to keep up with Mr. Wonka, but they were able to read what it said on quite a few of the doors as they hurried by. Eatable marshmallows, it said on one. Eatable marshmallow pillows, it said on one. "Marshmallow pillows are terrific," shouted Mr. Wonka as he dashed by. "They'll be all the rage when I get 'em into the shops. No time to go in, though. No time to go in. Lickable wallpaper for nurseries," it said on the next door. "Lovely stuff, lickable wallpaper," cried Mr. Wonka, rushing past. "It has pictures of fruits on it. Bananas, apples, oranges, grapes, pineapples, strawberries, and snozberries." "Snozberries?" said Mike TV. "Don't interrupt," said Mr. Wonka. "The wallpaper has pictures of all these fruits printed on it. When you lick a picture of a banana, it tastes like a banana. When you lick a strawberry, it tastes like a strawberry. And when you lick a snozberry, it tastes just exactly like a snozberry." Well, who ever heard of a snozberry? "But what does a snozberry taste like?" "You're mumbling again," said Mr. Wonka. "Speak louder next time. On we go. Hurry up." "Hot ice creams for cold days," it said on the next door. "Extremely useful in the winter," said Mr. Wonka, rushing on. "Hot ice creams warms you up to no end in freezing weather. I also make hot ice cubes for putting in hot drinks. Hot ice cubes makes hot drinks hotter." Cows that give chocolate milk," it said on the next door. "Ah, my pretty little cows," said Mr. Wonka. "How I love those cows." But why can't we see them?" asked Veruca Salt. "Why do we have to go rushing on past all these lovely rooms?" "We shall stop in time," called out Mr. Wonka. "Don't be so madly impatient." "Fizzy lifting drinks," it said on the next door. "Oh, those are fabulous," cried Mr. Wonka. "They fill you with bubbles, and the bubbles are full of a special kind of gas. And the gas is so terrifically lifting that it lifts you right off the ground just like a balloon. And up you go until your head hits the ceiling. And there you stay." "But how do you come down again?" asked little Charlie. "You do a burp, of course," said Mr. Wonka. "You do a great long rude burp, and up comes the gas and down comes you. But don't drink it outdoors. There's no knowing how high you'll be carried up if you do that. I gave some to an old Oompa Loompa once out in the backyard, and he went up and up and up and disappeared out of sight. It was very sad. I never saw him again." "He should have burped," Charlie said. "Of course he should have burped," said Mr. Wonka. "I stood there shouting, 'Burp, you silly arse! Burp, or you'll never come down again.' But he didn't, or couldn't, or wouldn't. I don't know which. Maybe he was too polite. He must be on the moon by now." On the next door it said, "Square candies that look round." "Wait!" cried Mr. Wonka, skidding suddenly to a halt. "I am very proud of my square candies that look round. Let's take a peek." Chapter 23. Square candies that look round. Everybody stopped and crowded to the door. The top half of the door was made of glass. Grandpa Joe lifted Charlie up so he could get a better view, and looking in, Charlie saw a long table, and on the table there were rows and rows of small white square-shaped candies. The candies looked very much like square sugar lumps, except that each of them had a funny little pink face painted on one side. At the end of the table, a number of Oompa Loompas were busily painting more faces on more candies. "There you are," cried Mr. Wonka. "Square candies that look round." "They don't look round to me," said Mike TV. "They look square." said Veruca Salt. They look completely square. But they are square, said Mr. Wonka. I never said they weren't. You said they were round, said Veruca Salt. I never said anything of the sort, said Mr. Wonka. I said they looked round. But they don't look round, said Mr. Veruca Salt. They look square. They look round, insisted Mr. Wonka. They most certainly do not look round, cried Mr. Veruca Salt. Veruca, darling, said Mrs. Salt, pay no attention to Mr. Wonka. He's lying to you. My dear old fish, said Mr. Wonka, go and boil your head. Oh, how dare you speak to me like that, shouted Mrs. Salt. Oh, do shut up, said Mr. Wonka. Now watch this. He took a key from his pocket and unlocked the door, and flung it open. Suddenly, at the sound of the door opening, all the rows and rows of little square candies looked quickly round to see who was coming in. The tiny faces actually turned towards the door and stared at Mr. Wonka. There you are, he cried triumphantly. They're looking round. Or else they look round. There's no argument about it. They are square candies that look round. By golly, he's right, said Grandpa Joe. Come on, said Mr. Wonka, starting off down the corridor again. On we go. We mustn't dawdle. Butterscotch and buttered gin, it said on the next door as they passed. Now that sounds a bit more interesting, said Mr. Salt, Veruca's father. Glorious stuff, said Mr. Wonka. The Oompa Loompas all adore it. It makes them tiddy. Listen, you can hear them in there now, whooping it up. Shrieks of laughter and snatches of singing could be heard coming through the closed door. They're drunk as lords, said Mr. Wonka. They're drinking butterscotch and soda. They like that best of all. Butter gin and tonic is also very popular. Follow me, please. We mustn't keep stopping like this. He turned left. He turned right. They came to a long flight of stairs. Mr. Wonka slid down the banisters. The three children did the same. Mrs. Salt and Mrs. TV, the only women now left in the party, were getting very tired, very out of breath. Mrs. Salt was a great fat creature with short legs, and she was blowing like a rhinoceros. This way, cried Mr. Wonka, turning left at the bottom of the stairs. Go slower, panted Mrs. Salt. Impossible, said Mr. Wonka. We should never get there in time if we did. Get where? Asked Veruca Salt. Never you mind, said Mr. Wonka. You just wait and see. Chapter 24. Veruca in the Nut Room. Mr. Wonka rushed on down the corridor. The Nut Room, it said on the next door they came to. All right, said Mr. Wonka. Stop here for a moment and catch your breath, and take a peek through the glass panel of this door. But don't go in. Whatever you do, don't go into the Nut Room. If you go in, you'll disturb the squirrels. Everyone looked around the door. Oh, look, Grandpa. Look, cried Charlie. Squirrel, shouted Veruca Salt. Jeepers, said Mike TV. I hate rodents. Especially them. But then again, that's just me. It was an amazing sight. 100 squirrels were seated upon high stools around a large table. On the table there were mounds and mounds of walnuts, and the squirrels were all working away like mad, shelling the walnuts at a tremendous speed. These squirrels are especially trained for getting the nuts out of walnuts, Mr. Wonka explained. Why use squirrels, Mike TV asked. Why not use Oompa Loompas? Because, said Mr. Wonka, Oompa Loompas can't get walnuts out of walnut shells in one piece. They always break them into two. Nobody except squirrels can get the whole walnut out of the walnut shells almost every single time. It is extremely difficult, but in my factory I insist upon using only whole walnuts. Therefore I have to have squirrels to do the job. Aren't they wonderful, the way they get those nuts out? And see, they first tap each walnut with their knuckles to make sure it's not a bad one. If it's bad, it makes a hollow sound, and they don't bother to open it. They just throw it down the garbage chute. There, look! Watch that squirrel nearest to us. I think he's got a bad one now. They watched the little squirrel as he tapped the walnut shell with his knuckles. He cocked his head to one side, listening intently. and suddenly he threw the nut over his shoulder into a large hole in the floor. "Hey, Mummy," shouted Veruca Salt suddenly. "I decided I wanted a squirrel. Get me one of those squirrels." "Who'd want one as a pet?" "Don't be silly, sweetheart," said Mrs. Salt. "These all belong to Mr. Wonka." "I don't care about that," shouted Veruca. "Oh, boy. I want one. All I've got at home is 2 dogs and 4 cats and 6 bunny rabbits and 2 parakeets and 3 canaries and a green parrot and a turtle and a bowl of goldfish and a cage of white mice and a silly old hamster. I want a squirrel." My God, she's got over 20 pets and she... Never mind, I'm not even going to complain. "All right, my pet," Mrs. Salt said soothingly. "Mummy will get you a squirrel just as soon as she possibly can." "But I don't want any old squirrel," Veruca shouted. "I want a trained squirrel." At this point, Mr. Salt, Veruca's father, stepped forward. "Very well, Wonka," he said importantly, taking out a wallet full of money. "How much do you want for these crazy squirrels? Name your price." "They're not for sale," Mr. Wonka answered. "She can't have one." "Who says I can't?" shouted Veruca. "Willy Wonka." "I'm going in to grab me a squirrel this very minute." "Don't," said Mr. Wonka quickly, but he was too late. The girl had already thrown open the door and rushed in. The moment she entered the room, 100 squirrels stopped what they were doing and turned their heads and stared at her with small black beady eyes. Veruca stopped also and stared back at them. Then her gaze fell upon a pretty little squirrel sitting nearest to her at the end of the table. The squirrel was holding a walnut in its paws. "All right," Veruca said, "I'll have you." As she reached out her hands to grab the squirrel, but as she did so, in that first split second when her hand started to go forward, there was a sudden flash of movement in the room, like a flash of brown lightning, and every single squirrel around the table took a flying leap towards her and landed on her body. In real life, they're more afraid of humans than we are of them. So obviously this would never happen in real life. And thank God for that, too. But anyways, 25 of them caught hold of her right arm and pinned it down. 25 more caught hold of her left arm and pinned that down. 25 caught hold of her left leg and anchored it to the ground. 24 caught hold of her left leg. And the one remaining squirrel, obviously the leader of them all, climbed up onto her shoulder and started tapping the wretched girl's head with its knuckles. "Save her!" cried Mrs. Salt. "Veruca, come back! What are they doing to her?" "They're testing her to see if she's a bad nug," said Mr. Wonka. "You watch." Veruca struggled furiously, but the squirrels held her tight and she couldn't move. The squirrel on her shoulder went tapping the side of her head with its knuckles. Then all at once the squirrels pulled Veruca to the ground and started carrying her across the floor. "My goodness, she is a bad nut after all," said Mr. Wonka. "Her head must have sounded quite hollow." Veruca kicked and screamed, but it was no use. The tiny strong paws held her tightly and she couldn't escape. "Where are they taking her?" shrieked Mrs. Salt. "She's going where all the other bad nuts go," said Mr. Willy Wonka. "Down the garbage chute." "By golly, she is going down the chute," said Mr. Salt, staring through the glass door at his daughter. "Then save her!" cried Mrs. Salt. "Too late," said Mr. Wonka. "She's gone." And indeed she had. "But where?" shrieked Mrs. Salt, flapping her arms. "What happens to the bad nuts? Where does the chute go to?" "That particular chute," Mr. Wonka told her, "runs directly into the great big main garbage pipe which carries away all the rubbish from every part of the factory. All the floor sweepings and potato peelings and rotten cabbages and fish heads and stuff like that." "Who eats fish and cabbage and potatoes in this factory, I'd like to know," said Mr. Wonka. Said Mike TV. "I do, of course," answered Mr. Wonka. "You don't think I live on cocoa beans, do you? I should think not." But, shrieked Mrs. Salt, "where does the great big pipe go to in the end?" "Why, to the furnace, of course," said Mr. Wonka calmly. "To the incinerator." Mrs. Salt opened her huge red mouth and started to scream. Don't worry, said Mr. Wonka. There's always a chance they've decided not to light it today.
A chance? Yelled Mrs. Salt. My darling Veruca, she'll be sizzled like a sausage.
Quite right, my dear, said Mr. Salt. Now see here, Wonka, he added. I think you've gone just a shade too far this time. I do indeed. My daughter may be a bit of a frump. I don't mind admitting it, but that doesn't mean you can roast her to a crisp. I'll have you know I am extremely cross about this. I really am. Oh, don't be cross, my dear sir, said Mr. Wonka. I expect she'll turn up again sooner or later. She may not even have gone down at all. She may be stuck in the chute just below the entrance hole, and if that's the case, all you have to do is go in and pull her up again. Hearing this, both Mr. and Mrs. Salt dashed into the nut room and ran over to the hole in the floor and peered in.
Veruca, shouted Mrs. Salt, are you down there?
There was no answer. Mrs. Salt bent further forward to get a closer look. She was now kneeling right on the edge of the hole with her head down and her enormous behind sticking up in the air like a giant mushroom. It was a dangerous position to be in. She needed only one tiny push, one gentle nudge in the right place. And that is exactly what the squirrels gave